Good evening, and thank you for joining me for the third and final session of our class, The Qur'an Exploring Character Virtues for a Shared Civic Life. And I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Yes, we are now at the final session. We've covered a lot of material, and like I said from the very beginning, I don't see this as the end of the conversation, but simply to spark your imagination and go back to your own tradition, your own religious tradition, your own spiritual tradition, and see how your own spiritual tradition, your own religious tradition could speak to this shared project about engaging the public sphere, where we come fully as our authentic selves, our full religious selves, spiritual selves, and learn how to live together by bringing virtues to the table that we all care about. They speak universally to all of us. Those virtues, those values have endured the test of time. And from a Muslim perspective, they are universal. They are dear and close to every human being. And I'm sure a lot of the themes resonated with you. And tonight we will go to our final portion and look a little bit more closely to the other character virtues, or the virtues that are mentioned in the Holy Scripture, the Quran. So I hope that it's helpful, that it gives us some orientation to start the conversation as we think about building a shared future and how do we want to live together, where we don't see religion talk or talk about spirituality as the end of a conversation or dialogue, but as a conversation starter, as something. And we know that religion is a powerful force in the world, that religion and spirituality will not go away, that it's meaningful to so many people, and that it gives meaning and purpose to the lives of so many human beings. So as a Muslim, as a scholar, I have offered my own experience, leaned into my own tradition, and wanted to see how can I, who has lived in so many different contexts in Germany, in Turkey, in the United States, and have always encountered diversity and difference, how do I use my own religious resources, the Quran and the prophetic teachings, as a source of inspiration, as a source of guidance, and a source of wisdom for this collective project. So we've learned that the major sources for Muslim life are the Quran, the Holy Scripture for Muslims, which is the main authority in the Islamic tradition. And then the Sunnah. Sunnah literally, maybe I haven't explained it before, but Sunnah means habit and model or custom. And specifically the model, the exemplary life and the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, who have guided Muslims for almost 1,500 years. And we have specifically looked at the written reports. I mean, these sayings, actions were codified by Muslims early on because Muslims believe Prophet Muhammad to be the vessel of God, the mouthpiece of God. And so he has normative and authoritative value for Muslim belief and practice. And so it doesn't matter what kind of subject in Islam, you will always go back, or you will always see Muslims going back to these two foundational sources. If there's any topic, any question, a Muslim will first investigate what does God say about a certain issue, or what are some principles in the Quran that can guide me in my quest for divine guidance. And similarly, the words of God that are manifested in the Quran, but the words of Prophet Muhammad are an interpretation of the Quran. It means that Prophet Muhammad embodies the teachings of the Quran. He's the living interpreter, and I've shared with you a lot of resources, many, many readings that hopefully give you a little bit of an understanding about the weight and the importance and the centrality of his life and teachings for the Muslim tradition. So that's really, really important. But also, I want to add, when we think about the Sunnah, the life and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, we also have the very early Muslim community, his male and female followers. So it's very important that it's not just simply a one-man show, but the Prophet Muhammad gives also authority to his early disciples, his early companions, among whom are women and men. So we have very early on important statements by these female companions who observe and learn and take in and absorb the teachings of Prophet Muhammad and closely follow him. And his wives, for example, are very, very important scholars in the formation of the Islamic tradition. So we think about the Sunnah broader, because Prophet Muhammad says, my companions, my early disciples are like stars. Whomever you follow, you will find your way. So the Sunnah is a very broader concept that has at its center, of course, Prophet Muhammad, but then you have the very important community around him who then follows, imitates, and closely also adopts these teachings and also passes it on, transmits it to the next generation as well. So very important that we have the women companions, the male companions, they all collaborate and cooperate in this Islamic enterprise of forming the next generation of Muslims. So I shared about my religious and spiritual resource, which is the Quran and the Sunnah, the teachings and the life of Prophet Muhammad. So these are, for Muslims, the spiritual hero is Prophet Muhammad. And like I said, his early followers, and then the sacred chain continues. But I wonder, and I'm curious to hear from you, who is your spiritual hero, past or present, who offers you inspiration and moral guidance to your life? To whom do you turn to when you are looking for some wisdom? And again, there is no limit to this question. I'm just curious, and I want to engage your thoughts here. And also the first question about if it's for the Muslim, mainly the Quran as a religious resource and a source of guidance. Where do you turn to if you don't consider yourself a Muslim, right? So just like to get a sense of where people are and what are some sources that we can look at together. Yes, very interesting. His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I'm seeing people are writing. Yes, it's great. I mean, there are many people who are maybe not always in the public eye, but you know, people who have shaped me spiritually. Very important informal learning moments are the women in my life, who all shaped me and who are not necessarily have an academic degree, but had a profound spiritual impact in my life growing up. The women in my community who served selflessly, tirelessly, and who were not seeking the stage or who were not very visible, but they were spiritual heroes and they continue to do sacred work. And so we don't often read about these people. We hear about them in our own stories, right? And sharing our sacred histories. That's beautiful, especially in this time of honoring the dead. I look to the lessons of the ancestors in my life. Mother Teresa, Guru Nanak, Henry Nouwen. Beautiful, yes. And that's one thing that I love to do is just collect these quotes of wisdom. So on my Pinterest account, you'll see all these people because truth is truth, and that wisdom, all the wisdom that comes from these people resonates with our shared human nature. It speaks to our spirit. And so you can definitely, once you take in some holy saying or some spiritual quote, it really speaks to you deeply. So I'm recognizing a lot of these names. I'm sure many of us do that. Thomas Merton, Gandhi, Jesus, peace be upon him. Yes. So thank you so much. This is wonderful. Everyday people living lives of quiet dignity. Yes, beautiful. Howard Thurman. We had a whole year dedicated to Howard Thurman. Many of you will remember that we had the Mannequin Clark lecture uh, that was offered by a Howard Thurman scholar. Beautiful. People who shaped me spiritually, my mother, my father, the prophet, peace be upon him. Thank you. My sister Ginny. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Keep it coming. I love reading the entries. Again, I'm just curious where people are. And we wanted to, so last time I've already started talking about my top 7 virtues. And like I said, it's hard to come to a list because there are just so many beautiful virtues slash values. I mean, I looked it up. Are virtues the same like values? Some say they are, some say they don't. But I'll go with virtues. Virtues as in aspiring towards spiritual excellence, moral excellence. And we've learned that we all are a perfect piece of art, but at the same time, we are also a work in progress. We always want to grow and learn and improve ourselves, so that that lifelong project of improving ourselves and learning about ourselves never ends. And so, but when it comes to the virtues and striving towards moral excellence or moral character and spiritual excellence, from an Islamic perspective, what was key here is that taqwa is really the core virtue, right? And I've explained it a lot, that where a Muslim anchors himself in a relationship with God, and that kind of complete or expansive God awareness then translates into other circles of life. And tonight we will walk through the other virtues, like compassion, justice, gratitude, courage, and patience. And of course, hope. We need a lot of hope, especially when we do the difficult work of trying to bring people together and unify them, because every human being is a universe, and complex and complicated and messy. And um, so bringing people together, serving community is not, as I've explained in my Hajj piece, is not an easy undertaking. It's a very hard, difficult, messy work. It's sacred work, but it's possible. And but it's work. It's sacred work that's definitely needs a hopeful outlook, because it's very easy to give up and surrender and just run away at times and feel utterly devastated. But we'll talk about this. That this is a very natural response when we experience disappointment and disillusionment, and we feel we can't continue anymore. It's very human. It's very natural to have these lows and highs in trying to build a collective, a personality, a community. So the Muslim community itself is very diverse and complex and beautiful, but then bringing others into the game and trying to build relationships takes patience, it takes courage, and it takes compassion and kindness and forgiveness. So those are the things we'll be talking about tonight. And as I noted earlier, the self, the human self in Islam needs to be anchored in God consciousness, with taqwa, which is a core virtue, many, many times mentioned in the Quran over and over, that God is ever present. That, today I took a long stroll through my neighborhood and I could just feel it. It's a simple knowing, a profound awareness, a beautiful, intense knowing that this world outside, the cosmos, the creation, um, that this world, this cosmos is governed by expansive, wide wisdom, by that, the aesthetics, the beauty, everything speaks to you and infuses you. There is no way, like the Quran says, that this just happens randomly. Everything is so beautifully in alignment, in harmony, in balance. You feel when you are out and observe the colors, the warm embrace and the kindness and the gentleness and the love of God. And it's his, just for a Muslim, it is what the Quran talks about, this expansive and this self-evident presence of a higher reality, of somebody who, in his ultimate wisdom and in ultimate love and compassion, has absolute control, power, and might over the universe. And that then invites someone, a believer, to cultivate God consciousness. So the more you reflect what the Quran calls the book of the universe, the cosmos is a book that invites the Muslim to be invites a Muslim or believer to investigate and reflect and meditate about its meanings. So when somebody goes out and just is witnessing all that wisdom, the beauty, that just cultivates taqwa, God consciousness. So this knowing that there is an ever-present divine creator, a compassionate sustainer, a compassionate creator at work, who's full of wisdom, who arranged and aligned and established the order in the universe with balance and harmony. So knowing that, of course, fills someone with awe. And also knowing that in deepening your taqwa, you also come to the conclusion that you're always that God is always your most intimate friend, that He is always present, He is always close to you. He is all hearing, He is all seeing, He is ever watchful, but not in a way that instills in you a sense of fear, but instills in you a sense of love. And that then, knowing that the human being was created and brought into existence by that compassionate creator and sustainer, instills a person with honor and dignity and grace. And that's where the Quran always tells the story about the human being and says that every human being has been given honor by the very fact that they were created by God and were endowed with a spirit, with a ruh. So the creation story in the Quran talks about the fact that every human being, no exception, is an honored creation of God, and that every human being has worth and value and is intrinsically sacred. So that then instills a sense of honor and dignity, but also invites a person to seek sincerity, right? If I know that God is all present in my private and public life, that invites me to authenticity, to integrity, and to trustworthiness, that I can't escape that divine reality. I can't cheat on that divine presence. I can't hide from that divine presence. And so the Muslim then, or the human being, is invited to cultivate a life that is ethically coherent, publicly and privately, to be a whole human being. And that means to align the mind and the heart and the body in a way that honors God's presence. And being in such a state, knowing that God is ever present, also creates a positive sense of shamefulness. Like, you think twice what to speak, how to look, how to interact with people, how to think, how to feel, because you know that God always is aware of your thoughts and feelings. So you very much try to feel in a way that is virtuous, express emotions that are virtuous. You even strive for spiritual excellence in the realm of feeling and emotions, and in the realm of thinking, because the inner universe is also uh, a universe that is only accessible to God. So that then cultivates deep taqwa, knowing that God is present and being mindful of Him. And that mindfulness is basically trying to express your love for God, right? So you want to live your life in a way that is pleasing to Him and attains to His love, and that then creates a sense, again, makes a human being a graceful human being, a beautiful human being, a human being who then shies away from wrongdoing or hurting others or speaking indecently or acting inappropriately. So there are all kinds of ramifications just if we focus on this very core virtue of taqwa. And so that's very important, because in Islam we don't just start with the self, because the self does not exist on its own independently. The self is sustained by these larger circles that are so nicely illustrated in these circles. So me as an individual with a heart, body, and mind, I cannot exist on my own. I am sustained by my parents, my family, my relatives, my friends, my community. I'm sustained and cared for and nourished by the creation, by the earth. So I'm in need, fundamentally in need, of all the creatures, of all these beings in the universe. I can't exist on my own. I am in existential relationship with all the other circles, with all the other beings in my life. And so the Quran speaks to the human being saying, as a self, you cannot exist on your own, because your body, you did not create your body by yourself. You didn't go into a store and bought your emotions and feelings and your organs, and they were given to you by someone, by that compassionate sustainer and creator, who, just like he arranged the whole universe with wisdom, care, and love, also governs and created and governs the human body, each one of us. So that then has brought us to the conclusion that my body, my heart, my mind, my feelings, my emotions, my intellect, my body parts, my whole life is a sacred trust. I don't own anything. Absolutely. I'm a caretaker of my body, myself, but I'm also a caretaker of the entire creation. So the goal in Islam is not just a claim to say I'm an entity, I'm an individual, autonomous, completely independent on my own. And there's beauty, like I said, in individual freedom. But I have also a sacred obligation towards the entire creation, towards all these circles that also have cared for me, sustained me, supported me. And what is my obligation in this sacred social contract? So Islam wants to aim for a balance between individuality, but also cultivating social relationships, understanding that we have a relational piece that is important to take care of, and that we are interdependent, that we are interwoven with the entire creation. And that then calls us to expand in our compassion. I can't just be indifferent to the people around me. I can't be indifferent to the needs of my body and my heart and my mind, but also cannot be indifferent to the other circles that are, serving me, nourishing me, taking care of me. I hope that makes sense. I mean, if you just think of food, right? I mean, our body is an existential need of food, which the Quran calls blessings, right? But in order to have and enjoy these blessings, you are in need of a chain of these circles. You basically are in need of human beings who prepare the food. You are in need of the earth and the universe and nature to collaborate and communicate and cooperate for you to enjoy the food and the blessings. There's a whole kind of collaborative project. So then for the individual, it is really important to think of virtuous living in a way that honors all these circles of life. That means I have an obligation towards not only myself to take care of myself, but Islamically, I have also an obligation, sacred obligation towards my family, my friends, my neighborhood, my workplace, my colleagues, all humankind, and the entire creation. So, me just being here, I have not come to this stage in my life on my own. I mean, there is, like I said, and many of you mentioned these spiritual heroes. I owe to all the spiritual heroes who have helped me to reach this place in my life, right? Who have supported me throughout my education, who helped raise me, my family, my friends, my community. There is a whole army of people and the creation behind me whom I owe some gratitude, right? Who I need to honor as well. So I think the reason why I wanted to stress this here is through God consciousness, we arrive at the notion that I have a sacred obligation towards all these circles of connection and care. And how do I care for these circles of concern? And number one thing, I'm sure some of you know her, the relationship expert Esther Perel. I sometimes listen to her. And she says the number one killer of any relationship is indifference. And that resonated so much because as a human being, what makes us a human being is to care and not to be indifferent to others. So if I do not acknowledge, the people in my life, if I do not acknowledge the partner in my life, if I don't appreciate them, if I dismiss them, if I never express gratitude, then that's a killer. That basically severes, cuts off the ties of, and creates distance, right? And then leads to some, the end of a relationship. And similarly, the most important relationship, of course, is not to be indifferent to the compassionate creator and sustainer. And out of that flows then the ethical and moral call to be a person of virtue in all of these circles, not to just care about your nation, but try to expand a care and concern also for the whole cosmos. And we know now existentially that whatever happens at the end of the other side in a country or wherever has a profound impact on our lives. We also know that our daily ethical lives, the way our lifestyles have a ripple effect on the other circles, right? So my water use, my electricity use, how I live ethically daily has an impact, negative or positive, on other members of this creation. So that is where we need to arrive to cultivate virtues that take into account these sacred ties and make sure that we live responsibly in a way that is ethically and morally coherent. I hope I'm making sense. I have a lot of thoughts in my mind, so it's hard for me to narrow down. But so the first was, like I said, the very self-evident number one virtue that over and over is mentioned in the Quran. Every chapter of the Quran starts with rahmah, that God has a compassionate love, a nurturing care and concern for everyone, every being, no exceptions. And so that's also emphasized in many Quranic verses, that God sent the prophet only as a rahmah for the worlds. And it's really important here, the plural. It's not saying we sent you as a mercy, as a compassionate act to one country, one tribe, one nation, but to all the worlds, which means for mainstream scholars, that means for all creation, right? That a person who is filled with God consciousness has a compassionate love and nurturing care and concern for all beings on this planet, and not simply to narrow it down, but try to expand as much as he can for all creation. So that also means the animal kingdom, that means the kingdom of plants and trees, that the prophet and a prophetic person is someone who really embodies compassion, love, nurturing, care, and concern. Rahma is such a vast, has so many definitions, so I try to offer some. But it's not just mercy. It doesn't mean that you need to feel sad in order to act, or that somebody needs to be poor or be in a position of hardship for you to respond with rahmah. Compassionate love, nurturing, care, and concern comes out of your own being. You don't need somebody to be in a state for you to react. It's just a state of who you are, right? And so that rahmah flows naturally and is universal, and there's no exceptions. That in this world, a Muslim or the human being is called to express concern and not to be indifferent to others. It's a very important aspect of moral excellence. And there's a very, very famous hadith, a very famous narration by Prophet Muhammad who speaks to this, that God's rahmah, God's compassionate love and concern includes every being, right? So I found it always a beautiful explanation. God has divided mercy or rahmah into 100 parts, and he retained with him 99 parts and sent down to earth one part. Through this one part, creatures deal with one another with compassion, so much so that an animal lifts its hoof over its young, lest it should hurt it. So imagine, so God is in ownership of 100% of rahmah. And so in this narration, it says that one piece of that was sent down on earth, but 99% remained with God. So it's still in that unseen realm that's where ultimate rahmah will come to expression in the hereafter. But only that one drop or that one piece or 1% was sent down to the earth. And that is the vast compassion that we witness, that we see the love and the parental love in the animal kingdom. It's the love that we, witness of a parent, the love that the parent shows to the child. So, but it's just 1%. It's just one drop of that 100% that was sent down, and that is so mind blowing because the majority of the rahmah is still with God. But if you could imagine, just what we are witnessing right now is one drop or 1%, and that is so expansive. And you see animals taking care of each other, feeding their cubs, and all the motherly love that people witness around them. I mean, it's just it's extraordinary how much rahmah is evident, but whatever we are seeing is simply only one part, right? But there's an invitation in these hadith narrations, or these Quranic statements and the prophetic statements, to be just embody that, right? That a Muslim has to grow in that rahmah, right? Cannot, if I'm a person who only shows rahmah, compassionate love to their own child, but is indifferent to the other children, or has no concern and care for other people in their community, that's a very narrow understanding of that rahmah that is described here. Because a Muslim is invited to expand in their rahmah, to witness the compassion around them and say, I want to embody that as well. I want to be that prophetic person or embody that prophetic love for everyone. So the merciful are shown mercy by the most merciful one. Be merciful on the earth, and you will be shown mercy from who is above the heavens. So clearly, a very universal directive. It's not saying just show care and compassion and concern for your own group, your own family, your own tribe, your own nation, your own race, your own ethnicity. No, no, no. You are caretaker of the entire earth, and somebody who follows prophetic teachings and virtues has to expand in their rahmah to all, and there cannot be excuses, right? So that's a very universal, very comprehensive invitation to try to show that same concern and compassion to all beings in the universe. Like I said, not just fellow human beings, but all, right? There's this one incident. We as a family, we took a stroll. I shared that with some others, and we saw when we came back, there was a little bird trapped in a mouse trap and was in anguish, deep anguish, trying to, in pain, trying to escape. And so my daughter and I, we ran to the house. We tried to get a towel, and my husband tried to free the little bird from the mouse trap. And eventually, alhamdulillah, all thanks be to God, we were able to free her. And that was just such a beautiful moment, just like witness my own humanity and say, I stopped, I cared, I made a difference to this bird's life. And my husband said something beautiful. He said, look, there are millions of birds, but none of them stopped, but we stopped and we helped her and we freed her. And I think that's the beauty of being human, like the ability to care and show compassion to other beings, and that you have the ability to offer support and help and uplift. And there was no other creature who could do that in that moment, but we were there. And I thought, maybe this little bird in the hereafter will, if everything, if I exhausted my options, that little bird will speak up and say, that day she stopped, Zainab stopped, and she cared. And so please, God, have mercy on her. So I hope that little bird will intercede for me. But for me, it just showed the beauty of human nature, that we have it in us to care for all, and that we are not indifferent, and that we have the potential to care for every being in this universe and be concerned, and that it touches us in a way. So just a little anecdote related to here. And there are many, many hadiths, many narrations that speak to this compassionate parental love and the nurturing care and concern. So one that really I found beautiful is that invites us to show compassion to everyone, is in the life of the Prophet, when it says here, the Prophet kissed his grandson Hassan, and I have 10 children and have never kissed any of them, retorted a proud, disapproving Bedouin. But the messenger, knowing the beauty of compassionate love in God's eyes, warned the man, he who shows no compassion, rahmah, he who shows no compassion will be shown no rahmah in the hereafter. So for me, and that's in a society, of course, where it was seen as unmanly or not masculine to express love, especially to children, especially to sons, of course, being somehow considered as, contrary to manhood, a masculinity, strong masculinity. And here we have the Prophet Muhammad challenging this notion. So if you look at the social context of that time, this is a very powerful hadith, right? To really challenge and transform people and go deep and say, if you do not show rahmah, if you do not show compassion, then you will not be shown compassion. So really saying that you have to go through that inward transformation in order to attain to God's love as well. So I think it's very tough, especially to the most vulnerable, right? Children who we know are growing and thriving through love and care, and that it's an existential need. Nobody, um, people or human beings decline in their growth when they don't experience love and affection and compassion, especially from their parents. So here we see here that the Prophet Muhammad challenges that and transforms society by embodying this compassion and showing that it's completely masculine to express love towards your children and grandchildren, to kiss them, right? And sadly, in many cultures today, that's still very common. Like you don't kiss your children or you don't show affection as if it's something inappropriate. So here we have the Prophet coming and challenges these kind of misconceptions and really inviting people to ponder and think what are some customs or traditions that are simply wrong and that they need to be revised. Here is I thought this is important because with compassionate love, nurturing, care, and concern also comes kindness and forgiveness, um, and gentleness. So I found it interesting how the verse connects rahma with these other virtues, right? So it is out of God's mercy that you, O Prophet, have been gentle with them. Had you been cruel or hard hearted, they would have certainly abandoned you. So pardon them, ask God's forgiveness for them, and consult with them in conducting matters. Once you make a decision, put your trust in God. Surely God loves those who trust Him. So here, highlighting gentleness is always coupled with compassion, that in our interactions, we are, gentle and kind. And that we also realize that forgiveness is really a big part of compassion, that we are all works in progress. Each of us has failures and flaws, and sometimes, certainly I myself say ignorant things or ignorant about many things, or can disappoint, hurt, can do wrong. And so to understand human nature, and sometimes people just intentionally or not knowingly do harm. And so forgiveness is a big element in compassion, and it's needed, absolutely needed, in interacting with people, always trying to express compassion in terms of forgiveness, so forgiving is part of compassion. That's all what I want to say. And here it's also just saying relationships are not perfect, and there will be people who will challenge you and who will do terrible things. And so what are ways to then grow forgiveness? And I said it last time, but the whole project in Islam is to bring out this human jewel, and a lot of these virtues come out in times of disappointment, darkness, hurt, despair. Forgiveness is not a virtue you grow when things are good. Forgiveness is a virtue that you grow and display when things are really hard. And it's hard to forgive, but it's those people that we look up to who come to that, who experienced immense wrongdoing or suffered gross injustice, but somehow have this amazing potential to forgive and reconcile and rebuild. I mean, I'm in awe of those people, and they've been always my spiritual heroes. But also to just highlight that forgiveness as a virtue doesn't just happen. It's something that grows, and it grows in climates of often hurt and disappointment and ignorance. And so just to keep in mind as we are thinking about a shared civic life, that sometimes people say things or do things, but it's not always malicious, but sometimes it's intentionally, sometimes it's just mere ignorance. And to how does forgiveness feature in the public sphere? All that's all what I want to point out. So here again, it says, "Let them pardon and forgive. Do you not wish that God should forgive you? God is most forgiving and merciful." So, boom, there comes again God consciousness, right? So taqwa again as a core virtue is saying here, God is the one who forgives all sins, and he loves to forgive, and God is most forgiving and merciful. It's coupled again with rahmah. So someone who wants to attain greater nearness to God and wants to embody these divine qualities and wants to display these beautiful attributes of God, the most forgiving, that those occasions are there then, right? If there are moments where the person asks for forgiveness and you grant forgiveness, that means you are also coming closer to the divine in that regard, because God is in ownership of this ultimate divine quality of the most forgiving. So God loves to forgive, and for many people, that's enough reason to cultivate forgiveness or to arrive at forgiveness, to free themselves and say, it's a reflection of who I want to be in my relationship with God, and not necessarily about the person if they change or not. Be merciful to others and you will receive mercy. Forgive others and God will forgive you. So the same idea is repeated here, that forgiveness as a virtue is a beautiful aspect to compassion. And the messenger told the story of a prophet who was beaten by his people, and he wiped the blood from his face, saying, "My Lord, forgive my people, for they do not know." So that's again a sacred narration by Prophet Muhammad, that the compassion of this prophet, of a previous prophet, a messenger of God, was so great that he still, in this moment of, uh, you know, great injustice and suffering, is still able to pray to God for their forgiveness for his own people. This realization that ultimately, in reality, those people did not harm me. Yeah, they might harm me physically, but they're actually harming themselves, because they are the ones who are ignorant and they are the ones who insist on wrongdoing. So the person who is physically harmed will not be held accountable in that regard, but it's the people who are acting unjustly and in an ignorant way are the ones who will be held accountable. So here it's this kind of still compassionate care and concern for them, which is such an ultimate expression of rahmah. So in human interactions in the public sphere, if there are moments, and there are many for those of us who are in the, especially in the interreligious work, there people say things or do things that might be, can be sometimes hurtful, disappointing, frustrating. But to arrive at this, to say, I, it's not always. Forgiveness is still very important, and to help people and to try to still in a relationship is a hard thing, right? So the next virtue is justice. And in Islam, justice is, again, I always struggle with the English explanations, but the literal meaning of adala, the Quran talks about justice. I mean, uses the term adala in the Quran. And basically, what adala means is to putting everything in the right place, putting everything in the right place. So we see here, for example, in one Quranic passage, um, it says here, "As for the sky, he raised it high and set the balance of justice, so that you may not transgress in the balance, weigh with justice, and do not fall short in the balance." So when we think of justice in the Quranic context, often several terms come to mind, like balance or scale, preserving the order, maintaining the balance. Those are the things. So everything is already perfect in the universe. It's just saying, don't mess it up. Just try to preserve and protect and keep the balance. That's the divine call to humanity, to live a life that does not transgress, that does not overstep certain boundaries. Because if we don't maintain the balance, or if we don't keep the boundaries, or don't respect the divine laws that govern the universe, when we fall into imbalance and chaos and confusion, and harmony is missing. And we see that, of course, now, especially in a time of global climate disasters. Like I said earlier, each one's ethical and moral lifestyle has an impact in the universe. So how I live my life affects the balance in the universe, in the creation. So here, when we look around us, what we see in the cosmos is an amazing alignment. It's a perfect arrangement, collaboration, like I said. It's a wonderful harmony and symphony of endless beings who are out there, who all respect each other's boundaries and respect each other's rights, and also collaborate and collectively work together on the basis of God consciousness. So the human being comes in now as a steward, as a caretaker. He is called to live responsibly with balance. Otherwise, what happens? Like I said, chaos, anarchy, confusion, imbalance, destruction. So there's a huge responsibility to act with justice in the universe, to maintain the balance. And what's also important here, I forgot my thought, but here to the fine-tuning argument, that's a very important argument also that comes in the Quran, that things are so arranged in such a fine way, or intricate and delicate way, that there is no reason to believe that it just happened randomly. The Quran always brings the argument that God fine-tuned the universe, that everything is in alignment, arrangement, and in perfect harmony. And the responsibility of the human being is to preserve that harmony and not to disturb the cosmic balance. So that's why first the Quran directs the gaze to the macrocosmos and then brings it back to conduct, to good character. Indeed, God commands justice, good conduct, as well as generosity to closer relatives. He forbids indecency, wickedness, and aggression. He instructs you, so perhaps you will be mindful. See how mindfulness of God is here tied with the other virtue, justice. So if I'm conscious of God and know that I'm always under his watchful gaze, I'll be very careful and cautious in my conduct and behavior, my interactions with others, because that's where it's really important to good conduct. Then if there is no good character, that means the internal world is also in imbalance and then creates aggression. So here the Quran basically mentions the macrocosmos and the justice in the macrocosmos, but then invites the human being to create the same inner balance in the internal world, meaning indecency, wickedness, and aggression are a manifestation of inner imbalance. So it means your mind, heart, and body are misaligned. So if you say my value is justice or my virtue is justice, but you speak lies about another person, or you do gossip or this and that, then your value that you affirm in your heart does not match with your speech, and there's a misalignment, a mismatch. It's not ethically coherent. It's not morally coherent, and that's where there is then an imbalance, which then translates into indecency, wickedness, and aggression towards others. So the example of the cosmos is reason enough for God to say, You are a microcosmos, and your responsibility is to bring order into your internal universe by following the example of the cosmic order. I hope I'm making sense here. The argument in the Quran is always like that. Look at the macrocosmos, read the universe, identify the virtues, and then look back into your internal universe and try to bring back everything in balance and harmony. If that's not happening, like I said, everything then falls into imbalance. So our thinking, feeling, and acting are not then harmoniously aligned. So here it again basically captures the same idea, similar notion. You who believe, uphold justice, and bear witness to God, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or your close relatives. Whether the person is rich or poor, God can best take care of both. Refrain from following your own desire so that you can act justly. If you distort or neglect justice, God is fully aware of what you do. So again, the ending is about taqwa. I see you. I know what you're up to. Be aware that I'm always with you. I'm your constant companion. So there is a sense of healthy fear, and that's a good thing to like know. Fear keeps us in check. You know, when we are on the highway and we stay in our lane, that healthy fear is life giving. And so sometimes the Quran operates with that fear, and it's not like, oh, I'm going to come and get you, but preserving your own life and the rights of others, sometimes you need a healthy dose of fear, knowing that God is present, fully aware of your thoughts, of your actions. And here, that's a beautiful quote, passage from the Quran that is on the wall of Harvard Law School. It's a very high ideal of justice because it calls the human being to be just, even if it is against yourself, even if it means that you will risk or your own career, your life, uh, you know, um, if your own interests are at stake, to still be honest and authentic and a person of principle integrity and a person of justice is not an easy thing to do. And so here it says sometimes we want to protect our families or our relatives or our nation, and some person would speak lies. But here, the divine command is to always uphold justice, to be fair and equitable and balanced and just, even if it means that your own interests might be at stake, your parents, your close relatives, because sometimes there is this sense of self-preservation, right? I want to protect myself first, and I should not speak up, or I shouldn't say anything, or I don't want to harm my parents in any way. But here, and in the prophetic lifestyle, we see that justice is a core virtue. And once we are not acting just and fair, that it creates disunity in the creation and in the communities. And so it's very important to uphold justice. So that means even, for example, when it comes to interreligious work, if a community is always painted in negative ways or attributed negative characteristics, that's not fair. It's not just. And fundamentally, my own work is a work of justice because I came to this work because I saw all my life that an entire community is always associated with negative traits. And that is not fair. It's not just. Because human beings are not simply black white. There is nuance, there is complexity. And to be fair means let's look at the good examples and let's look at bad examples, or let's see the flaws and the good sides of a person. They're not just either good or bad, but we all know in our own experience, if we are fair to ourselves, we have good aspects in our humanity. We also have low aspects in our humanity, and that's also very true about communities. So if in the project of living a shared life, if any community, doesn't mean religious or just religious communities, but any community, if there's a sense that they're somehow marginalized or dismissed or constantly painted as this one negative collective, that is simply an act of injustice and needs to be rectified. And that is something that requires the work of each one of us. It's not just the work of one. But that's an example, right? If you open your textbook and you see that an entire community is not showing up in your history book, that is fundamentally an erasure of a people, and it's an unjust act. And so those kind of things, because this earth, this creation is cultivated by all people, everyone had their part and contribution. So it's more realistic, and it's probably closer to the truth to say, who are those people who collectively cared for the earth, and how can I uplift them, make them more visible, acknowledge them? And so that's a work of justice. And so those are the things that, of course, for the public sphere are extremely important, because making a group or an entire people or person invisible, erasing their contribution or eradicating their contribution throughout history, is a fundamentally act of injustice. I'm speaking as a Muslim who grew up in the school system, and in my history books or science books, I've never seen mentioning of how Islamic civilization contributed to human history in terms of medicine, physics, chemistry, philosophy. We've never done anything. We've never contributed. We never creatively engaged these ideas. And that then calls me to say, okay, I need to do my part as an educator to bring in a little bit more of a just picture, because I see there is a population that is not being treated fairly. So those are the things that we need to think about in the public sphere as we think about virtues of justice. Do we acknowledge and appreciate the communities who have nurtured and cared for this creation collectively, right? So moving on, justice, you who believe, be steadfast in your devotion to God and bear witness impartially. Do not let hatred of others lead you away from justice. This is something that, of course, when we have been wronged by a group or a person, and hatred and hostility is a real feeling, that can lead us away from our justice work. So we have to be, again, it's very important to be self-aware, emotionally self-aware. Where am I at? Am I being impartial, or am I being tainted and misguided by my feelings towards this person or this community? So do not let hatred of others lead you away from justice, but adhere to justice, for that is closer to awareness of God. So it's, again, you can't escape God's presence. God consciousness, again, is mentioned here. God knows your inner secrets, your thoughts, your thought process, your emotions, your feelings. He's aware of your internal processes. And so be mindful of God. God is well aware of all that you do. So here again, the self is centered, anchored in God consciousness. And that guides you even in this very rough moment of and hard moment of trying to act with justice, but you realize, oh, there are some heavy feelings at work. I need to be cautious here. Maybe I need to step away because I can't be impartial. So those are the type of things that the Quran wants us to remember, that we are we are a universe, and we have all these very heavy and complicated emotions and feelings that we need to work through and align and devote all to the one God who, again, is aware of our secrets, our thoughts, our struggles, and that nobody can escape that. And that kind of God consciousness invites a human being to strive higher and aspire better. So, and then after the Quran, the Prophet speaks about the virtue of justice. Those who are just and fair will be with God, because God's quality is to be just. On thrones of light at the right hand of the most merciful, those who are just in their rulings and in their dealings with their families and those of whom they are in charge. So every person is in a place of authority. Every person, every individual is in charge of someone, and everybody is called to do this work of micro justice. So sometimes we think of justice as this big thing that governments or officials have to deal with. No, here it says everyone is called to do the work of justice and fairness, and that we all, shepherds and leaders, and that we all have privilege, and that we all can bring in justice into the world by way of our conduct. And it starts in our families, in our relationships, how we treat others, interact with us, starts in our neighborhoods, and then has this ripple effect into the other outer circles. So it's this inward transformation that then shows up in outward engagement. And here we have again a very intricate notion of justice. It's a incident in the life of the prophet, and it says here, a man was a messenger of God when his son came. He kissed him and set him down on his thigh. Then his daughter came and she sat to his side. The prophet said, "Why do you not treat them equally?" It's such a powerful hadith. Again, it's beautiful for me. Why? Because it captures this highest ideal of justice, emotional justice. Are you expressing your emotions in an equal and fair way, in a just way? And that feeling in itself is from God as a trust. But we here see it's directed to the son, right? So we know from 7th century Arabia that especially girls and women were looked down upon, were seen as a dishonor, as a disgrace. And here we have again the prophet challenging this very deep internal transformation that he is initiating. You are not treating them equally. You have preferred your son over her, and she comes and is basically pushed aside. She doesn't get the same fair emotional attention and love. It's something that is completely unjust. It's felt, he feels it, and he articulates it. The companions witness it. The people around him witness it, and they take notice. And so it's really speaking very deep about just character, about how emotions and feelings and love, even love, need to be fair. For me, that is just such an important reminder that even in our emotional world and how we express our feelings, if we come into a room and we have given somebody maybe more attention, or one community more attention and love and affection than another, then that's not just. It has to be a fair treatment. So we can even expand on this in very and more, wider groups in the public sphere. Whoever harms a non-Muslim citizen will find me as his adversary on the day of judgment. That's a very direct, important prophetic statement that non-Muslim citizens or non-Muslim members of the Muslim community are protected citizens, and they are under the protection of the Muslim leaders, and they have rights. Their rights for religious expression, and so there's a whole field of study about this. So I just took this hadith, and you all were able to read the Charter of Medina, where Jews and polytheists were living together, and Christians were, and that was also expanded. These type of agreements were also expanded to other communities, right? And so for Muslims, these kind of prophetic statements have a weight in terms of just dealings. So I'm moving on to the next virtue. It's shukr, which is gratitude. I mean, we are now in the season of Thanksgiving, and it's one of my favorite holidays here in the United States, just expressing gratitude, right? Because earlier I said that the Quran tells the believer that all what they have is a trust from God, right? So it's a blessing, it's a trust, it's given from someone, from that compassionate creator and sustainer, and it calls for gratitude. And gratitude is not simply saying thank you, God, and that's it, but to express gratitude with all what the person has, right? If they have knowledge, if they have skills, if they have talents, if they have wealth and money and property, those are all God given blessings, and they require gratitude in action. What that means, if somebody is given knowledge, to share that knowledge is an expression of gratitude and thankfulness, to say, this was given to me and God wants me to share that knowledge and that skill, and to give back to the community and to share these talents with others. So gratitude has a very important action piece. It's not just sitting and counting your blessings, by actively expressing gratitude. So the Quran talks about these blessings. It is God who brought you out of your mother's wombs, knowing nothing, and gave you hearing and sight and intellects so that you might be thankful. So even like from our very self, our bodies, our eyes, our hearing, our ability to think and ponder and meditate and contemplate are all blessings from God. Knowledge, sacred knowledge, all these blessings are from God. But how do we express gratitude? By sharing, because God loves to share. He has given it to us, so the call is to also share it with others. And He has granted you some of everything that you asked Him for. If you tried to count God's blessings, you would never be able to number them. Indeed, humankind is truly unjust and ungrateful. So there are many descriptions who speak about the vices of humans, and one is that we tend to be unjust and ungrateful. That we can't complain, and we are not completely just about how we view our lives, and sometimes we ingratitude and injustice are also aspects of the human being, right? It's not just all good. So why is gratitude important as we think about the public sphere? And so gratitude is part of the spiritual DNA of a Muslim believer, right? So always seeing the glass half full, always seeing abundance in one's life, because there's always much more to be grateful for despite hardship. And this comes from a person, from the Prophet, who experienced his whole life was misery. I mean, he buried his own 6 children, died before him. He buried them. His wife died. He grew up as an orphan. He never met his father. His mother died when he was 6 years old. He witnessed many of his companions being tortured, and he experienced exile, ridicule, mocking. It still continues to this day. Even in our modern time, the mocking and ridicule still continues. Wild sayings about the Prophet. So much misery. He grew up in poverty, in anguish, and experienced all kinds of injustice. Yet, despite all of it, he was still somebody who looked from a lens of gratitude. And we see that here in his spirituality. He would pray sometimes all night until his feet were swollen. And his wife would ask him, "Why do you do this when God has forgiven your past and future sins?" And the Prophet said, "Shall I not be a grateful servant?" It's a very beautiful response to always have this outlook of abundance in your life. Instead of absences, I don't have this and this is missing, I went through that. But to have the ability to look at life with gratitude and abundance, and always thinking that you are blessed and honored by God, but by just being a human being, that you have always more to be thankful for. And I found it very moving that this comes from a person, a human being, who has only experienced anguish in his life, and yet is able to just because of that, because of his unique spiritual disposition, was able to transform others around him. And like I said last time, that's the power of character, the power of how you can transform others around you. And that's why the people around him had such a great love for him, because he stood out in that regard. He taught them how to liberate yourself and come to true human freedom by not being chained to any events or any experiences, but being fully liberated by being anchored in your greatest freedom with God. Once He is on your side, once you have God's love, nothing can conquer you, nothing can harm you, nothing can ever threaten you. So I think that is very telling. And the prophet says the person who does not express gratitude to people, now we're coming to the very important part for us, is not thankful to God. So if the person does not express gratitude to people or communities, he's not thankful to God. So being grateful to God also goes through the people that God created, right? To acknowledge them, to appreciate them, to uplift them, to recognize their contributions to the creation. Like I said earlier, it's tied to the justice work, right? Fundamentally. When Prophet Muhammad migrated to Medina, and there are many examples in his life. So when after the persecution in Mecca, where his own people tried to kill him and harm him, he was forced to immigrate to Medina. And there in Medina, in the city of Medina, you had a diverse population consisting of Muslims, Jews, and polytheists. And here he established the Charter of Medina, where he created a pluralistic framework for cooperation and mutual protection among the various religious communities. One key aspect of this treaty was the Prophet's appreciation and acknowledgement of the contributions of other religious groups to the stability and welfare of society. So this is how gratitude as a virtue in the public sphere comes to existence. Showing appreciation for the people who were already there. They built the city. They contributed to the welfare of society. They were not just sitting lazily. They were actively participating in the social project and the public enterprise. And his gratitude toward their peaceful coexistence and alliance was not only expressed in words, but also through respectful and fair treatment, inclusion in political agreements, and the upholding of their rights. But that's very important. As 7th century Arabia, you have the Charter of Medina, where Prophet Muhammad calls on the Jewish tribes and the polytheistic tribes and non-believers to say, we all have different convictions, but let's agree on this charter that we want to live peacefully, that we all have a place in this society, that we all aim for the same goals. And that's a very important contribution. It's acknowledging their existence, their dignity, their contributions, their work. So I think for us today, if somebody is missing at the table, they're not acknowledged. That's basically meaning we do not express gratitude to what they did for the shared human enterprise, to the public sphere, because everybody made a contribution, right? So this is an example how gratitude can feature in the public sphere. It's a recognition of all communities. It's a recognition, it's an appreciation of their contributions to human history and to social values, humanitarian work, and peace-building efforts, right? They were already there. And that's not to say that tensions did not exist. They did exist, in fact, right? I mean, just like I said, communities are messy, human relationships are complex, but this was something that was initiated, was put into practice, and it's a wonderful example. It still guides Muslims in how to live in diverse societies. And valuing the shared history of cooperation and coexistence as exemplified in the Prophet's time and using it as a foundation for building trust. So Muslims looked at and today even still look at the Charter of Medina and think, how can this source or this example guide us, and how can we expand on it as we live in diverse communities and express our gratitude um, to our communities. Courage is another very important virtue. It's called shaja'a in the Islamic context. It speaks to the fact, again, the Prophet Muhammad's life was marked by despair and darkness and challenges and suffering and injustice. Yet, despite all, he always showed up with character and moral courage. And the Quran talks about that. Many people before him, the messengers of God, the prophets, and those who struggled alongside them, always displayed moral courage. It's courage, especially when you are operating in a climate of fear and oppression and repression, is a high virtue, because you are deciding, I'm going to risk it. I'm going to, be there and advance the cause. And so the Quran talks about the many people who fought along with their prophets and never faltered despite whatever losses they suffered in the cause of God, nor did they weaken or give in. God loves those who patiently persevere. So there is an example from the Prophet's Muhammad life where he talks about, it's called the Alliance of the Virtues. So before his prophetic career, when he was a young person, there was an incident of oppression in Mecca. And the tribes then, in order to prevent further oppression, came together in an alliance of the virtues. It's called Hilful Fudul. That was in the year 590, and they all agreed to a pact saying that they will all work together in order to prevent injustice and oppression in their communities. And this was a pact before Prophet Muhammad's prophetic career. He was very young, but he says at the end, I witnessed a pact, and that I would not exchange for the best of camels. And if I were called to it now in Islam, I would respond. So basically, when he becomes, he's called to be a prophet, he remembers this alliance of the virtues, and what a beautiful pact and agreement it was. And it was an agreement between people of all kinds of convictions, that he came together and agreed on shared values, and that they would show up with the courage to protect those who are vulnerable and weak. So there's a whole story behind. I didn't read all of this, especially so courage, especially as a virtue when you are, I don't need to explain further, but I think in a climate where so many overwhelming things are happening that threaten the very fabric of the moral fabric of our societies, that that moral courage is something that we all need to display and think about what can I do, each and individually, what can I do to display that courage, and to fight for the right cause, meaning to struggle for and advance humanity, and preserve the moral fabric of communities, and preserve the rights and the dignity of all members of society. This is a larger question and cannot be answered now in this mini session. But courage is something that was always displayed, right, since the beginning of human history, and it's a prophetic virtue. It's something that with Prophet Muhammad and other messengers of God, like the Quran tells us, they always showed up in or came in a climate of darkness and despair. And those virtues come to existence in that climate. Spiritual growth and progress and moral progress is initiated in these kind of contexts. So courage comes to shine in those moments, and you see the real character of people in these moments, right? When things get tough, not comfortable, but when things get rough and difficult, to ask, what's my responsibility? How can I challenge certain wrongdoings? And so that also takes patience, which is another virtue. It's a virtue that the Quran over and over emphasizes. I always tell my husband, if patience would be easy, it wouldn't be mentioned in the Quran. And I think it's true too. Patience is also not something that is a passive act. I mean, it was mentioned earlier that patience is something that God loves, but it's also something that it takes energy and a discipline. Perseverance is probably the better term. To persevere, meaning that you continue regardless of what happens, to say, I will not give up my cause. I will not give up on my ideals, on my higher vision for humanity. So that we actively and patiently persevere, and sometimes also restrain, right? Patience also has this element of restraining ourselves from negative judgment, that we do not give into labeling people too quickly, or rushing to negative judgments too quickly if things do not happen the way we want, but that we say the way is the goal, right? And here it's very important, because oftentimes I will hear from people, I'm so frustrated, I'm doing this work in the community for 40 plus years, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. I'm so frustrated, I'm so disappointed, I'm so disillusioned, I'll give up on everything. And so from a Quranic perspective, that's I understand, that that's a very human response, and it's I empathize with that response. But at the same time, it's important to mention that in Islam, it's not a tradition that focuses on outcomes. It's a process-oriented religion, right? It's not just to get to the goal quickly, but how do you change along the way, and how do you conduct yourself along the way is the most important aspect, actually. So, meaning Islam is a process-oriented religion. In the process, you are changing and are challenged and are growing. You might not see the positive change in your lifetime, but does that mean that your efforts and your energy and your sweat and your concerns were in vain? No. From an Islamic perspective, not, right? Because the way is the goal. Once you are on the path, that is valuable. That is absolutely worthy. And the Quran tells us we cannot, sometimes we won't be able to see the change in our lifetime, but it's still valuable to be on that path. And so this is very important when we think about outcomes and goals. Is the goal really to change things, or is it maybe that I change in the process? Sometimes I'm not so sure. Of course, the Quran calls us to tackle important problems and issues, but at the same time, it's also the internal change. And maybe I will not see the outward change, but what about me witnessing the internal change that has occurred in my own life? Maybe that outer challenge has initiated an inner growth, a spiritual growth, a moral growth, and that's equally valuable, while still being ambitious, spiritually and morally ambitious, in trying to better and improve societies and communities. So it's all a worthy goal, but we ultimately don't know if the change will occur in our lifetimes. And we don't know what kind of change is one that is desired by God. So this is more from a theological perspective, to stress that Islam is a process-oriented religion, that to be on the path is worthy and valuable and honorable, and to say, as long as I'm on this path, it's totally worth it, right? And like Frodo from Lord of the Rings said, the good is worth fighting for. And so to be on that path in itself is honorable and noble and beautiful. But to have that kind of perseverance and patience, and also, or I say self-restraint from giving in too quickly into negative judgments or presumptions. So uh, there are also examples from the life of the prophet. I know we've reached our time, so let me just go over quickly. My last one is, of course, I talked about patience, but what we all need, of course, is hope. And so, one of my favorite passages in the Quran goes back to the creation story. It's such a beautiful dialogue between God and the angels. So, God decides to create the human being, a human authority on earth, and the angels are curious. They almost they wonder. They display some holy curiosity. So, this dialogue tells us in the Quran. Remember when your Lord said to the angels, I'm going to place a successive human authority on earth. And the angels ask God, will you place in it someone who will spread corruption there and shed blood while we glorify your praises and proclaim your holiness? God responded, I know what you do not know. So it's so beautiful. The angels, who are the most beautiful, supernatural, spiritual beings you can imagine, glorifying God. They are sinless, they're pure, they're holy. And they ask, we are here, we glorify you, we exist, we glorify you, we praise you, we proclaim your holiness. Why do you want to create another being? And they know us, they know the human being. They also know about the destructive aspect of the human being, the negative aspect in our human nature, this destructive potential. So they say, will you place in it someone who will spread corruption there and shed blood? And what's so interesting to me that God here does not refute the angel's argument. He doesn't say, no, they will not spread corruption, they will not destroy the earth. He knows about that aspect of human nature. He knows that there is a destructive element or the worst impulses in us. But I love the response. He responds to them and says, I know what you do not know. So despite all of that, knowing about our destructive potential and that we indeed can do great wrong and injustice and cause suffering on the earth, there is a jewel in human nature that God trusts the human being so much, that he's so hopeful about the human being that he says it's totally worth to create the human being. And that already was angels on the scene. I mean, who glorify, who are perfect, who worship in the most perfect way. So you ask yourself, what is it? What is it, the inner mystery of the human being that made God create the human being despite all of that negative aspect within us? What that tells me is that no matter how much evil we see in the world, or injustice and suffering and chaos that is caused by human beings, and we each wrestle with these inner and internal impulses, the good of us and the bad of us, is all present. But there's so much hope that God expresses here, the trust in the human being. And I love to hear the divine trust in the human being. That's why I feel honored again as a human being, to think that God trusts me. I want to be worthy of that divine trust. I do not want to disappoint him. I want to live up to that divine trust and hope. I have something in me where, God responds to the angels that there is something that is totally worth creating the human being. And I think if we could have that kind of positive assumption about other fellow human beings, that each one of us, every human being, has a potential to change and to grow and to bring beauty and wisdom and goodness into the world. And that is manifested in this divine response, that it tells us. And I think it invites me as a human being to always have and cultivate good assumptions about my fellow human beings, regardless what's going on, to never give up on them, to never give up on myself, to always have hope in me and hope in them. And hope also means to trust that ultimately the power and the wisdom and the love and the compassion that governs this world is in control and knows why we are, dealing with these kind of challenges and hardships. But there is an invitation here to not give up on each other, to always see the best in each other, to always believe in the goodness and the capacity to do good and create good and invent and imagine and you know uh, bring beauty into the world is so great in the human being, and we see it every day. The things we invent, the things we create and innovate and heal, and it's just extraordinary, the capacity, this amazing human nature we have, that um, that made God respond in such a way. And so I hope we can express that towards each other, that we can expand this divine hope and the divine trust to all human beings, to never label each other with negative characteristics, but always believe in that fundamental goodness in all of us. And also to the ability to change, because the success of the prophetic career was that people changed. And the hopeful message is that one person's amazing good character transformed a whole society, people around him, and also, yeah, that when we show up with good character, compassion, and courage every day, that this will create ripple effects. So I want to. I know I'm already 8 minutes over, but this concludes basically what I wanted to say. So yes, and there are so many examples in the prophet's life where he always, when he visited the city of Taif and he was stoned by its residents, he prayed for forgiveness and believed that maybe the next generation of the city's inhabitants will change, and never lost hope, right? So again, my words: high moral character and spiritual excellence is an act of resistance and resilience. That's the lessons that I take for me, is being good and doing good in the world. It's the greatest act of resistance and resilience. So we should never underestimate the power of good character and spiritual excellence and virtuous living. Embodying moral virtues can transform others. That's what I learned from these prophetic teachings and examples. And especially in times of darkness and despair, those are opportunities for spiritual growth and progress, to bring out these amazing aspects of our human nature, that potential to do good and rise up to the challenge is there. And then also, one thing that I've learned: trying to cultivate an ethically and morally coherent life that nurtures body, mind, and heart. So trying to align all aspects of myself with my values and virtues, to speak, hear, see, feel, act in a way that is all in harmony, just like in the creation. And then trying to grow healthy connections with all circles of life that then expand into the public sphere. So it's not a life that is simply concerned with their own individual goals, but how do I help others thrive and flourish and advance in their goals? So that should be the ultimate concern for a person of virtue. And like I said, the way is the goal, process-oriented versus outcome-based. We might not see the change in our lifetime, but the process itself is worthy and noble and holy and never wasted. Anything that is done for God, for a believer, is never wasted. It's all preserved, recorded, seen, valued, appreciated. It's never a wasted effort. So those are my takeaways from this little excursion.